How's it going, everybody? KG here. Today I'm going to show you how to use your TV to get the most out of your gaming experiences, no matter what game you're playing. So I'm going to be using the best game ever created, Elden Ring, today with the new Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. And don't worry, there won't be any spoilers here. I couldn't show you them if I wanted to. Unfortunately, I still need to get good. But let's talk about what we can do with these settings and really make these TVs awesome. Now, I know that Elden Ring's not everybody's cup of tea, so I will be explaining this in terms that you can use for every game. Now, if you are trying to find HDR settings for different games, you should definitely check out Gaming Tech on YouTube. He is a friend of the channel, and I highly suggest checking out his videos. He does really good HDR analysis and settings videos, so if you're looking for individual games, definitely check him out. So really what I want to show you mainly today is how you can make all your TVs work for you. So no matter what brand you're using, and we're going to start with Sony, work our way to LG, then go to Samsung. So what we're doing with the Sony TVs is all going to be kind of preference based. Really, all these settings that I'm showing you are going to be preference based. There's no perfect settings out there. It's really just going to be what you like at the end of the day. If you want reference level calibration, you have to pay somebody to go to your house and calibrate your TV. That is the only way you are going to get a truly calibrated TV. Otherwise, you are just using somebody else's settings, and that is all you're doing. There's a ton of free settings out there, so I suggest to go look some up. You could take somebody else's settings, say like Classy Tech Calibrations, who has completely free settings, who is an ISF reference calibrator. You should definitely check out his channel if you want to get really close to reference as possible without going the calibration route. I also post my suggested settings on this channel as well, and this is just kind of my preference based settings. And with my settings, I'm not going to be playing pretend master calibrator. I'm just going to show you what each setting does and give you my suggested value. And you can also tweak the settings to your liking, which I always suggest doing. But what I want to show you today is how to use some of these tools at your disposal and tweak them the way you want to tweak them. This is going to teach you how to use your TV. And I think that's the best way to approach settings, in my opinion, is to learn what each thing does and then decide at the end of the day, are you going to use it or are you not going to use it? So the first one that you're going to want to look at is going to be your HDR gamma, and you can decrease this if you feel like the black floor is a little bit high in the game that you're playing. This can sometimes help with that, or you can raise it if you feel like there are some shadows that are being crushed. And you can also play around with the black level if you want, but I suggest leaving this at 50 most of the time. Now, black equalizer is going to be a setting that allows you to see in the shadow. It's pretty much like night vision. And this is going to be something that does completely ruin your HDR picture. In my opinion, not something that I would want to keep on in something like Elden Ring, for example. But if you're playing a first person shooter, you want to see that guy that's hiding in the shadows in the corner, that would be a good way to kind of cheat if you want to. Under color, you can see live color. This is going to be a way to saturate your color a little bit more, give it a little bit more oomph, and you should try it out. See if you like live color on any of the settings. You can also just change the color from its default value into a more saturated value. This is just how you can crank up the color to your liking if you want to. Now, Sony TVs tend to be a little undersaturated, especially when we're talking about low luminance. So you might want to crank up the color a little bit in some degree. So that's why I want to show you that. Now, when we're talking about reality creation, this is a really cool setting. You can use this however you want. Some people use this at a maximum setting value. I do not. I think that's a little bit too crazy, but leaving it at like 25, 35, that is going to give you just a little bit more clarity to your picture. It's a perceived clarity to your image. It's not sharpening the whole entire image. It's just selecting certain areas and making those look a little bit sharper. So it's not like a global sharpness setting. That is totally different. One thing you'll have to know about Sony TVs is that they have always on dynamic tone mapping. So setting up your HDR is going to be a little bit of a pain, and I would suggest keeping it on gradation preferred. This is the best way to play most games. Although if you want a little bit more brightness impact, you can go for brightness preferred. This does tend to lift the picture a little bit though, so I personally do not use it a lot. Although there are some games where I will turn it to brightness preferred. So you can see me toggle it on right here in Elden Ring, showing you kind of the difference of when I have it on versus off. And it's really a personal preference thing at the end of the day. So you do you when it comes down to this setting. All right, before we get into LG TVs and Samsung TVs and if Dolby Vision gaming even matters, if you guys are enjoying this video and you want to see more gaming content for TVs, you definitely got to let me know. And one of the ways to let me know is by hitting the like button. And if you want to help support the channel, please plan on making your next tech purchase using one of my affiliate links in the description below. Thank you so much for your support. All right, let's continue on with the video. So for the LG, I'm actually going to be using the LG C1 for this example. And the reason why I wanted to use the LG C1 is to show you that this can go back as far as the LG C1 for a lot of what we're talking about today. So if you have an LG OLED, you know you probably have something called the game optimizer. A lot of other TVs have a game optimizer type setting where you can go and select some shortcuts for your game settings. Things like that, right? You can get in and out of game genres. But one of the things that LG has is the black stabilizer and the white stabilizer. This is a pretty powerful tool overall, and you can really set games how you like with these two options. So you can really play around with this for other games, multiple games. I've fixed the problems that I've had in some games that have just an absolute terrible black floor. And I've also gone crazy on some other games with the white stabilizer as well, where I really just added a custom look to that game that I thought was way better than what the creator wanted for that game. And that's what I love about tweaking TVs to your liking, is that really it doesn't matter what you're having on display, you can change it to your liking. So try it, try stuff out. That's all I encourage people to do, is try stuff out. Because really, a lot of these games are really good games, but they have poor HDR implementations, and we need ways to fix that. So that's kind of what I'm showing you today. Is I'm showing you little tools that can tweak HDR settings to be a little bit more tolerable. You can also use fine-tune dark areas for some of the issues that you might have with VRR flicker. Although VRR flicker is something that I want to make clear is on every TV. Some people say it's for just LCD TVs and some people say it's for OLED TVs. Trust me, both of them have it. You will have to deal with this in some way or another if you are using VRR. And VRR is just going to be something you want to enable if you are experiencing screen tearing. If you're somebody who's playing console, I honestly will suggest turning off VRR because it creates more problems than it solves, as most of the console games are going to be stable enough. You're not really going to need to use VRR. So it's really just something that if you feel like you are experiencing tearing, yeah, turn it on. But I do think this is more so a setting that is going to benefit PC users than console users. And that generally applies for everything, not just LG. And I know we're talking about LG right now, but let's go deeper into the LG settings when you're talking about color. So we talked about live color with Sony. What if I told you that LG has something somewhat similar? So under color, if you go to fine tune color, you will see something that says color upgrade, low, medium, and high. If you want specific control over certain colors, you can go to user selection, select the color. For example, I'm going to select yellow right here and look at the brass shield. We're going to go ahead and just completely oversaturate that into more of a yellow look by setting the yellow at a ridiculously high amount just to kind of demonstrate it. And I'm going to toggle it on and off here so you can see what it's doing to the brass shield. Pretty interesting stuff. So you can go ahead and play around with that if you want to. So maybe the color red is a little undersaturated on the TV that you're using for LG. Usually LG actually has a pretty saturated red, so that's a bad example. But let's say it was undersaturated. You could go ahead and fine tune that color to your liking. The other thing is the dynamic tone mapping. So much like the Sony TVs, you have dynamic tone mapping on the LG TVs, but unlike the Sony TVs, it's not always on. This is where being in the HGIG mode will benefit you. Now, this is more to get the creator's intent of the actual game that you're playing. Now, if you're somebody who's more along the lines of this game is too dark in HGIG, I want a little bit more of a preference-based look to it, then go ahead and turn on dynamic tone mapping on. This is going to be similar to what you see with brightness preferred, although it is going to lift things a little bit more than what you saw with brightness preferred. So I tend to not use this for something like Elden Ring because I do think it does ruin the atmospheric look that has. It totally is a personal preference. There are games where maybe I will turn on dynamic tone mapping on. For example, sports games are very undertuned in terms of the HDR, so there I would use dynamic tone mapping on absolutely. For 2024 LG owners, you have the ability to select professional mode, and then you can tune the 4000 mastering to your liking. This is going to allow you to kind of have a little bit of an alternative to HGIG. Maybe you don't like what HGIG is giving you for that game. Try out professional mode and tweak this setting. All right, now let's move on to Samsung TVs. If you go ahead and hold the play button down if you are in game mode, then you can go ahead and get the game bar to pop up on Samsung TVs. The first thing you may notice if you have a newer Samsung TV is that it will be in an auto default mode where it will auto select the game genre that you're playing. This is totally something that I wouldn't even bother using. So we're going to show you how to navigate away from this. So even if your TV doesn't have this, don't worry about it because we're not going to use it. When it comes down to setting a Samsung up, there's two things you'll have to remember. When you go into the game settings menu for the Samsung TVs, you are going to select Game HDR on. This can also be labeled on other Samsung TVs as HGIG. Setting these things accordingly is supposed to make your TV work with the HDR system level calibration. Now, luckily for the TV that I'm testing today, the QN900D, it looks like that is going to work for us. Some Samsung TVs, though, will not. So you have two different options to select from. I'm going to go over both. You have basic and advanced. We're going to start with basic. Basic is static tone mapping. And when you are going to set it to basic for the very first time, it's important that you now go from the basic and then you go to your expert picture settings and change a few things if it is on by default. Some things you may not like. For example, the color space will be in native. We're not going to use the native color space. We're going to use auto sometimes, depending on the TV you have. If you have a QD OLED, I suggest using BT 2020. And if you have a QLED, I even suggest using BT 2020 here as well. Although it is more saturated and it is something that maybe you have to bump down the color a little bit. It's a personal preference thing. If you have something like a Samsung S90C, again, check out Classy Tech Calibrations. He has a guide on how to set up the BT 2020 for the S90C, for example, and he's going to probably have one for the S90D and S95D as well. Definitely stay tuned to his channel. Go subscribe to his channel. Now, the next thing will be sharpness. You know, that's kind of like a personal preference thing, but it will be defaulting to 10. So if you're somebody who keeps it at 0, you're definitely going to want to be aware that setting basic is going to set it to 10. You're also going to want to see the color temperature matches your preference. The other thing you can take a look at is if you feel like your game is a little over brightened in the shadows, maybe you're seeing more in the dark than you should, then you're going to want to take down the ST2084 slider or the shadow detail slider. And you can also do the opposite. If you feel like your game is too dark, you can raise it up on the shadow detail slider. And if you're somebody who just really wants to get more HDR impact, but you're okay with a little bit of raise and a little bit of lift, then you can bump up the ST2084 slider to your liking. Again, it's all your choice, and that's the beauty of TVs is you can do whatever the heck you want with these settings. That's why I'm showing you guys how to use them rather than telling you you must use them like this, because everybody is going to be different at the end of the day. So that would be if you want the creator's intent for HDR, you would be using the system level calibration with basic. But let's say you don't want that. You want dynamic tone mapping on like the Sony and the LG TVs we discussed. What if you want to go that route? You want a brighter presentation overall. Then you're going to want to set the TV to advanced on the game HDR setting. This is going to put your TV into the active tone mapping state. Now I have to be really clear that this is going to be only for TVs from 2023 and onward. So it will not apply to, say, the S95B, where that does not have a setting for active. That is going to be something you have to be aware of. Again, like basic, when you go into the menus here, you'll see that there is going to be a whole different slew of changes to your settings all of a sudden for your expert settings. This is going to put contrast enhancer on high by default. You likely do not want this on high by default. If you do, then put it on high. But let's say, for example, I do not want contrast enhancer on by default, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And I'm also going to have to switch the color space once again, as it is in native by default. The sharpness once again will be at 10. Again, color temperature, you're going to want to check that as well and set it to your setting that you like to use. So within active, you'll see that it does brighten the picture up a little bit more. It gives you a little bit more HDR impact. This is something that a lot of people love to use for their game mode, and so I suggest giving it a try. You might like it as well, and it is a really good alternative to using just straight up contrast enhancer, what people use usually because they don't know any other options that are out there that are going to give them that kind of pop, that impact. But I want to show you why I suggest not using contrast enhancer, and that's because it can wash out the image and it can also clip details. And when I say clip details, what that means is just losing information somewhere in the image. You're either losing color information or you're losing highlight information. There's a lot that can be lost when you use a setting like contrast enhancer. So that is why I personally do not use it. It tends to over brighten the picture even more. Now, you can absolutely use contrast enhancer if you want. Again, this is your settings. This is your personal settings. So if you like contrast enhancer, absolutely use it. The other thing that you can check out if you have a 2024 Samsung TV is Color Booster. This is much like Live Color, where you can have a color adjustment, more saturation in select colors. And this is pretty much going to be what I was showing you with the Live Color. So check those things out. Now, one thing that's really unique to Samsung TVs is the ability to have motion interpolation with your gaming at a low latency. If you like motion interpolation for gaming or ever wanted it, it is a really nice tool because what you can essentially do is take your 30 frames per second games and make them feel like they are running in 60 frames per second. Yes, I do stand by it. I use it myself and I love it. So I always suggest people should at least try it out. You can have some motion artifacts if you are sensitive to it. You'll want to be aware of that, but it does typically work better with stable 30 frames per second games. I'm telling you, it is a game changer for the Nintendo Switch. It is also a really good way of getting some of your quality mode that runs in 30 frames per second on certain consoles to make it feel a little bit smoother at the end of the day. All right, really quickly, I want to talk about Dolby Vision gaming for one split second because that's all it really deserves. This is just a suggestion, but don't use it. It's not worth it. Nobody should be using Dolby Vision gaming. Most of the Dolby Vision game modes that are on all the TVs are completely messed up. Either they're over brightened or they just do not look right when compared to HDR10. So I would suggest not even bothering with Dolby Vision gaming. All right, well, that is game mode. I hope you learned something today. If you guys want to watch more game videos, definitely check out right here this comparison between all the 2024 LG and Samsung gaming TVs. This is a showdown that I did. You're definitely not going to want to miss that. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, please leave a comment telling me you want to see videos like this. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.